Hey, welcome everybody to episode 3 of Covering All Topics with your host Bryce Rankowitz and the world famous Supercross star and one of the best professional motocrossers in the world, AJ the Cat, Cat and Zero. How you doing, AJ?
Albert's here, reporting for duty.
Welcome, sir. All right, so the Cat Podcast, where we'll never ever talk about cats because AJ and I are both dog people. So if you have found us by mistake and you're looking for felines, go find another podcast. But thank you for tuning in to episode 3, and thank you to all who have supported us on our first 2 episodes. Those are both up on iTunes and everywhere you can get podcasts these days, so go check those out. And we appreciate all your support thus far. This episode of the podcast is going to be really fun. We are sponsored this episode by the Collective Experience. Collective Experience is a supporter of AJ, and he's going to go into that in a minute. But what the Collective Experience is, it's an exclusive fan experience that allows its participants to get a VIP, hands-on, almost like an internship-like experience with pro riders of motocross and supercross riders. And it just so happens that the owner of the Collective Experience is our first guest. But before we get to him, AJ, why don't you fill everybody in about what the Collective Experience really is?
Yeah, absolutely. So nice intro, by the way. Nice warning
thanks.
as far as the cats go. We don't want any. Maybe we could have Bear on as one of my guests, and he could talk about how much he hates cats.
True. Yeah, I'll put Chase on as well. And love chat.
So yeah, Dave is somebody that I've known for quite a few years, since I was probably 12, 13, 14 years old. We grew up in the New England area racing local races together. Just somebody who's super passionate about the sport and kind of has that entrepreneurial mindset like I do. And he came to me with an idea, and I gave him some ideas back, and he really developed something that turned out pretty awesome. So the Collective Experience is it's a behind the scenes VIP fan experience program that these fans can basically sign up under their favorite privateer rider. So whether it's myself, Tyler Bowers, Adam Enticknap, there's a whole list of awesome riders that you can sign up under. And the cool part about it is people are really immersed into the program. I can at least speak for myself personally. I know when we have either an intern or a fan that's shadowing us for the day, it's incredibly hands-on, and I think they're actually a little caught off guard with how thrown into the program they actually are. For a privateer like myself, every little bit helps, and all hands on deck. Every extra person is a benefit to us. So these people are reviewing footage with us in between time qualifying. They're going down to the tunnel with us in some occasions. They're, helping make sure we're on our schedule and everything's kind of clicking off the way it's supposed to. It's really pretty awesome. And for somebody wanting to get their feet wet in the industry, and we've had a lot of people in the past, whether it was through the internship program or just through the fan experience program, the experience is what you make of it. And if you really commit to the experience and you're an outgoing person, you're going to make contacts. And ultimately, that's what it's all about, is knowing the right people. That's just kind of how this world works. And this experience is really going to introduce you to all the people you need to know.
Awesome. So if everybody's interested, and we're gonna do a deeper dive into the Collective Experience coming up here, but check them out at thecollectivexp.com. Follow them on Instagram at thecollectivex. And without further ado, we're going to introduce all-around cool guy, Dave Drakes. As I mentioned, he's the founder, the curator of the Collective Experience, but his day job is pretty darn cool too. He is the systems engineer specializing in vehicle dynamics for a little company you may have heard of called Harley Davidson Motorcycles. So, Dave, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm excited to be on and talk some moto, cover a lot of topics, and get into it, man. This is one of my favorite podcasts of the year so far, so I'm excited.
Thanks, man. We really appreciate it. So why don't you tell us, for our own benefit and everyone listening, how did you get the job with Harley Davidson? I mean, that sounds like such a dream job for a moto fan or a motorcycle fan in general.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a lot of fun, man. Basically, I grew up as a motorcycle, motocross, supercross nerd. Just like AJ said, we grew up racing together for years and years. After high school, that only took me so far, and I wanted to get in the motorcycle industry. So went to a mechanics program, learned how to overhaul engines and work on motors, and one thing led to another, and I was like, man, I want to get into engineering. So went into engineering school and applied the same sort of principles and hands-on experience. And one thing just kind of snowballed between like different internships and going on different trips to engineering conventions, and I met up with Harley Davidson. And once they found out about my motocross background and some of the hands-on stuff with motor development, they made me the offer, and been there ever since. And it's super, super fun, man. I mean, every day I get a chance to be around motorcycles and test them and push them to the limits. And like you said, it's nothing better for a person who's in motorcycles.
That's awesome. So what, we hear systems engineer specializing in vehicle dynamics. That's a really fancy title, but break that down for the average listener.
It's just a glorified test monkey, pretty much. No,
so, it's a very hands-on. I mean,
yeah,
sure.
It's super hands-on. So it's pretty much my group's job to make sure that we take every bike that's in sort of that concept phase and make sure that we refine it to make sure that it handles as best as possible. So, a lot of those big full dresser, big bagger Harleys that you see, those things look like they should handle like garbage, but they actually handle amazingly and are extremely capable on the track. So it's our job to write our prototypes, develop testing and maneuvers so that we can fully vet out any inconsistencies or troubles with the chassis, and then report that back to some of the other engineers and say, hey, these are my recommendations. Let me help you refine your design and make sure that it fits what my recommendations are. So a lot of back and forth traveling the tracks. I talked to you guys earlier in the week, and I was in Florida for a bit, and I'll just get back to Milwaukee, and I'll probably be back in Florida next week for some more testing runs. And it's really cool. We get a chance to collaborate with a lot of different parts of the company. Get to ride motorcycles, which is always a good time, and I get to be a diva, which is nice, and say what I want. So I'm really good at that part.
Let me ask you this. So for everybody who's ever sat in a science class or is sitting in a science class right now, and they're sitting themselves like, why do I ever need to know this? Like, how is this going to affect my life? It sounds like what you're doing and your testing and handling, there seems to be a lot of science that would have to go into that, I'm imagining, right? So you apply that to somebody who's just sitting there thinking, I'll never use this.
Oh, definitely. I was one of those same people when I was, in high school and even middle school. Just going through some of the fundamentals of mathematics and physics and stuff. And in my job, I use that every single day. I mean, things the most obscure equations that I would never even think, are real. We end up using, whether it's for simulation or to understand why a bike's handling a certain way with inertias or mass properties. I would say it definitely depends on what you want your interest to be geared to, but I would never say, now that you're never going to use, some of the things that you're learning in school where, some of it you might not apply, but that's super rare, especially in something like when you're in STEM, like, mathematics or the sciences or what have you. Something always pops up where you have to run back to that fundamental knowledge.
Now, I have to say, myself, I was guilty of being one of the people that when I heard the name Harley Davidson, like my mind would always go to the, like the Fat Boy or like the Heritage. I don't know, just like the
chopper,
just like the old school, just like an old man's bike, I guess. It seems like Harley, especially over the past few years, they have some really cool stuff. Like even as I sit here just on the website, like that the Fat Bob is awesome. I've told you before, I love that FXDR 114. That thing is amazing looking. I know Axel Hodges has one of those now. They have that electric one coming out. Now, is the company hiring a lot of younger guys like yourself? And do you think that young guys like yourself have a lot to do with the fact that these bikes are looking a lot different?
I like to think so. Yeah. As part of my role within Harley is to make sure that I go out and help recruit and hire young talent at a lot of different conventions and stuff. And I think they're doing a really, really good job at bringing in some fresh eyes and people that you might not associate with motorcycle riding. Because, like you said, I was the same way where I looked at Harley as like an old man's bike. I never gave them a second look when they passed me on the highway. I'd be looking at a sport bike or a dirt bike being trailered down the highway before I looked at a Harley. But yeah, the company is definitely changing. It's a really good time to be part of Harley Davidson because they're really expanding their reach. They're stepping outside of the box. It's good for any company, and a lot of the people that you're seeing at our building and the development center, they're younger and younger. They're more and more diverse. I mean, I can guarantee you 10 years ago, you wouldn't see a dude looking like me with my tattoos and dreads walking around a development center going over, bike design. So,
Right.
I think for sure that they're expanding sort of expanding their reach, expanding the demographics that they're trying to market to and that they're trying to, whose voice they're trying to spread, throughout the industry. So, I think you guys are going to be really excited with some of the bikes we're coming out with, some of the campaigns and the people that you see who are behind the company. It's going to shake things up, man. It's going to be really, really cool.
Now, can we talk electric really quick? I know, and I'm still mad at you for this. We were 45 minutes into a podcast on Tuesday night where we quickly realized that your phone was plugged in and it was causing this interference. So we had to trash the whole podcast. But we had a cool conversation going about the electric stuff and kind of like with this whole fallout with Alta. I don't know if you know anything on that, or I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on electric.
Yeah. Again, I am probably going to be apologizing about that all season about the phone call mishap. But yeah, I mean, like I said before, I'm a huge proponent for electric bikes. I think they're some of the coolest types of technologies out there. We're coming out with a bike next year that we announced, as well as some other really cool, unique electric vehicles that I'm personally excited about. That I think are really, really going to shake up not only the motorcycling industry, but even broader. Even looking at like the bicycle industry and stuff like that too. So I think it's going to be really, really exciting. Yeah, in terms of the Alta deal, it was super cool to see a dirt bike centric company like Alta kind of try to be incorporated with something like Harley, and thought that was really, really, really cool for the time it lasted. I think we're kind of going off in a different direction now, but still a lot of those learnings and fundamentals with that partnership is like super, super cool to have seen happen.
Now, what happened with
now,
that? Do you know? It just they had two different ideas what they wanted to happen, or
I think it's something like that. I honestly don't have enough information to speak to it fully, but I think they decided to go in different directions. Just, two different maybe two different ideologies or paths that they want to take the companies down. So which happens all the time.
Was Harley really did they have that much control over what Alta was doing? Or were they just more of like a financier with like a vested interest in what they were doing? I mean, I would think that Alta was making the shot, calling the shots, but then Harley, based on whatever operational issues they were having, decided to do whatever they did, which whatever. But I can't imagine Harley would be overseeing day-to-day decisions at Alta. Were they?
Oh no, I think they were just more of a helping hand, and again, I don't have all the details for it, but right. Harley wasn't saying, hey, I want this, and you have to do this now. It was more of like a just a helping hand partnership for a little bit, and just to see how they could both help each other for some of their product planning.
I'll tell you what, a lot of people.
So we actually got one at work, and I walked in. When you walk into our building, there's you go up past security and all the scanners and the glass doors and stuff, and it's just a long hallway with toolboxes, and you see just 40 to 50 prototype bikes on either side of a hallway with everyone's like desks and everything else on the sides, which it was a really, really cool look. And at the end of it, the first time you go through there, you're like, wow, motorcycles. But if you see it every day, you kind of glaze over and go back to your desk. But at the end of the mock-up floor, we call it, was a yellow Alta, and I walked by and I had to like double take it. And I was like, holy crap, that's an Alta. That's like a dirt bike, you know? I started freaking out. And since my job is to ride bikes, I was begging my bosses to let me ride that thing. And they know that, you know, I race motocross and, you know, I've been prone to some crashes here and there. So they immediately put the kibosh on that one. So, they're like, yeah, you just flipped a full bagger, Harley. You're not riding that bike. Gotcha.
That's
So,
I'll
but
tell
yeah,
you,
they did let me ride the supermoto version, which was super fun. That thing
that's
was made to
awesome.
last to ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot
I'll
of
tell
fun.
you that I'm looking forward to more electric everything. And there's definitely going to be that purist part of me that loves the sound of a naturally aspirated motor and the rumble of a 4-stroke or a V-twin or whatever. And I'll be sad to see that go. And I'll probably always have a toy that will produce that sound for nostalgia's sake. But man, electric it's proven itself to be superior pretty much in every way. I mean, especially with like a motorcycle where throttle control and throttle response and torque and all those metrics are so critical. I mean, the Alta on paper and maybe even real life, I have not ridden one, but it sounds just like a superior machine. And it could really change the whole way that people are riding bikes, I would imagine.
Well, look at how competitive it was already, just with Durham on it at Straight Rhythm, or Josh Hill, the guys that were riding that bike. Who was it? Oh, was it Josh Hill that did really well at Straight Rhythm on it?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And Durham did Straight Rhythm this year on it, and granted, he didn't make it very far in the brackets, but he still looked amazing on the bike, and it looks super well developed. And I was asking Darren about it, and he really had nothing but good things to say. So considering it's so early on in its development, I think that these things are just going to, I don't think it's going to be very long before supercross stadiums are silent, which is definitely going to be
that'd be
weird.
so weird.
It's going to be weird. Different. Like, do they play music? Do they just listen to us all yell at each other? Because people are yelling at each other out there. With electric bikes, you're going to be able to hear all of that.
That might make for some interesting racing. I'm wondering if when they're going to pull a trigger. Obviously, the Alta thing that kind of threw a wrench in at the cog there, trying to get Alta or an electric bike into a supercross stadium sooner than later. But I know they were in endurocross as of this year. So like Alta was racing in a pro environment as recently as a couple months ago before they ceased operations. I wonder.
And they
I wonder
would have been
if they
in
make
Supercross already if it weren't for Feld or Super. I mean, whoever AMA, they're a big old pain in the butt. So yeah, I think the debate then would be more of which class it can ride in and which class it would be fair for it to ride in. To my knowledge, I think the Alta is kind of more comparable to a 250F.
Well, that's what it raced Straight Rhythm as, right? Didn't it race Straight Rhythm against the 125s?
No. This year it raced against
the 250Fs.
Against the 252 strokes, which that's kind of also like the 252 strokes used to be able to race with the 250Fs, at least at an amateur level, which was never fair because they're definitely faster. I don't know. I think that's where the kind of the issue is now. It's like, where does that bike fit? And I think the two biggest challenges as far as bike development right now is one, battery life. I know the batteries don't last very long on them at all. I don't think they last even long enough to make a 30-minute moto, which is a problem. And then weight. I think they're super, super heavy. But I don't know. They seem awesome. I've been dying to ride one. I think it's only going to be good for the sport. You see, especially, and we're all three of us are from Connecticut. I grew up in a good time. Dave, we were there in a good time. Like, we had Mototown, we had Rocky Hill, we had almost like tracks up the wazoo. I mean, I was 15, 20, 30 minutes from 6 or 7 different places to ride. And now there's none of that. And it's all because of people complaining about sound is what it
Noise.
is.
Yep.
So if you eliminate that, I mean, then the only factor I would imagine is liability being one, and then dust control. So I would think that a lot more people are going to be able to ride and get away with riding.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it brings more people access to it. And I think it can, I really, just based on how that bike, no clutch, the response, the throttle response, so I've heard, is ridiculous. The ease of which it's ridden, I think could take an average rider and almost make them a better rider just throwing them on that bike, because you don't have to worry about things like clutch. So that everything about the clutch and all the things you teach about clutch control in your academy, it's just gone. And that might like lend itself to a new set of issues. But yeah, I think it has the potential to, like you said, get it more accessible for people in especially tighter quarters or more urban environment, not city, but in a neighborhood where you have a little bit of land, you can spin laps around your house, but not disturb everybody around you. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think it'll be awesome when this really starts to make some headway.
Right, and that's good for everybody. I mean, the more people that are riding dirt bikes, the more money that's being dumped into the industry, the more money that the racers are going to make. So I think it's all good. I'm curious as to, I know I've said in the past, like, I hope I'm retired by the time it goes electric, but I don't know. I mean, I'd be very curious. I know right now it for at least Darren Durham said that it takes somebody with, and he said, like, my type of style. So somebody that's known to be, more of a finesse rider and have the throttle control, because it is so torquey and it's just all or nothing. But then you got to imagine that they're going to, as traction control develops and all of that gets better too. Like, I guess my concern with that is that it would become maybe too much like NASCAR, where it's
Homogenized.
Yeah, and everything's governed, and like everyone's going the same exact speed. But I don't think it'll ever get that extreme, just because motocross, there's always that's what I love about the sport, is there's so many variables. And this is what I tell my students. I mean, from the way your body's feeling to the way for Supercross, we ride a different track every single weekend. So the track is ever changing. Every time you come around, the ruts are different. The jumps are different. There could be a rock where there wasn't a rock. There could be somebody that's coming into your line that wasn't there before. There's always going to be those variables. My concern, I guess, with electric is it's just going to take a lot of those variables out. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
I think you're still going to have those standout guys like the Roxtons and the Stewarts. They're still gonna emerge. But I like what you guys said, going back to taking out some of the variables. I think it'll kind of be the same as when they introduced four-stroke into the equation. And I know for me personally, when we were all on two-strokes, like my first year on big bikes, it was like 05 or 06. You started seeing guys who you were better than or had more skill that were passing you, because they don't have to work as hard. The power bands are way different. The bike tracks better. It's just the overall sort of more efficient and just that overall better package. And I wonder if that's going to happen with sort of the electric movement. We're going to start seeing guys who don't have to worry about like the clutching, like you said, or the shifting, or if they're able to eliminate that one extra variable, it's going to make them that much faster. We're going to see the sport elevate that much more, with the introduction of four-stroke.
Well, and maybe bikes being a little bit more equal or fair wouldn't be a bad thing either. I mean, look at, I could use Red Bull Straight Rhythm as a perfect example for that, like being in the 125 class. All of our bikes were crazy slow. Well, I had an amazing 125, don't get me wrong, and every other 125 there was amazing. But they were all very slow, and I think the difference between them all, and it almost was like it equaled out the playing field. And that was a race I did well at, because I think my technique was able to shine a little bit more, rather than at a Supercross race. I'm clearly on inferior equipment, and a lot of people are. And then you have a lot of the top guys like Roxon, who is so superior to so many guys technique wise, and he has the good equipment. So it's separating him that much more. I don't know. Maybe it would make things more interesting.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point. I mean, think about a factory team, factory bike, and all of the differences. Just even down to just the any nut, any bolt you could think of in that motor is the best version of that you could possibly get. So when you're stacking up your setup, which is essentially a stock bike, next to a factory motorcycle, it's a night and day difference. But if we start talking electric, how much customization, how much enhancement can they do really to the motor? I mean, outside, I know nothing about electric motors, but what
Yeah, Dave would probably know more than us.
How could a factory team differentiate their bike outside of the exterior? You know, that'd be interesting.
I think that would come down to just overall power delivery and the ability to really fine tune how that power is delivered per each
Getting
rider.
the traction to the ground.
Exactly. So someone like an AJ who has that technique and that finesse, would like something much different than a guy who just he's used to and comfortable with just hammering it wide open on the brake, wide open, and somebody that's really like a brutish rider. So I think that refinement and allowing a rider to really use his tool in the best way, I think a lot of it will come from that. And then the continuation of chassis refinement, suspension refinement. But I think a lot of one cool feature is you actually get a chance to see exactly what the motor is doing through a lot of these sensors and like readouts that you're doing. So you could see everything that's going on with that motor and possibly real time even. You kind of set it up right. So I think it opens up the doors for a lot of research and development into this industry.
Yeah. So Dave, back to your day job. I want to get to the collective experience, and we're going to go there. But as far as your testing and stuff like that and prototyping, you're pretty much overseeing bikes from the prototype phase right out to delivery of a model year bike. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, right. I have a 2-part question. One is, essentially, what is the lead time a lot of the times with your projects? For example, from the time that Harley has a new prototype, I mean, unseen, we could go 2 routes. One is an unseen bike, never before released. Or on the flip side of the coin, even just something that might need some update. What are the type of lead times for your projects? How much testing before the consumer sees that on the floor?
It kind of varies. So that one example you had of like a bike that's just going purely from concept, from scratch all the way to production, where it's on the dealer floors. It could be anywhere from 7 to 5 years. Just going through all of the cost management and manufacturing process and resource management and refinement of the engine, durability. It does take some time, especially if that's more of a platform. So we're introducing multiple new bikes with this new engine or this new frame or something like that. Like you saw when we introduced our Milwaukee 8 engine a couple years ago, and all that stuff. But if it's something more like a refinement, like, hey, we've got this awesome, great bike, but we want to kind of give it this sort of custom flair with new wheels and paint and stuff. That's usually more so like a year, maybe a little bit under. But it really depends. I know myself personally. We've got projects that are model year 22, 23, and I'll probably get a model year 24 project coming up here pretty soon. So we're thinking pretty far into the future on a lot of our projects.
What type of, without giving any proprietary information away, what type of things can the motorcycle consumer expect in the future? And you don't even have to limit that to Harley Davidson. Like, just based on what you're seeing now across the industry and what they're looking into for the future. Again, without giving anything proprietary away, What types of things can consumers expect to see?
I think there's going to be a shift. Like we talked about, more electric stuff from a lot of different companies. I think the user interface for a lot of motorcycles is going to be different. To the point where we kind of see it in cars. We kind of see it in our houses with like Google Voice and Alexa and stuff like that, where we're able to just tell our bikes like show me a route where I can go, grab some food or get some gas, local dealers. Where you can kind of, touch your screen and see a dealer near you, pre-order a part that you think might be wrong with your bike. And by the time you get there, parts at the front desk will pay for it, they put it on for you. Just making the riding, that riding journey a little bit less hectic, a little bit more, I don't want to say predictable, but almost to give a more of a safety net. I can definitely see like the whole user interface and support of your motorcycle. I can see that being a huge sort of like plus in the future. And I know Harley, we announced that we're coming out with an off-road bike pretty soon. We're coming out with more of a sport bike, sort of naked bike. So, we're excited to see where that takes the company and introduces us to more riders. So that's more my style anyway, man. I'm anything that goes on off-road or it's more sporty, it has my name written all over it.
I love hearing that though, because I mean, think about like the Japanese brands. They pretty much all have a huge range of models. I mean, we're talking road, off-road, hybrids, old school, new school, rice rockets. I mean, that's to hear that Harley is going to start delving into that a couple different segments. That's encouraging to me, especially I know it hasn't been all great for Harley recently, right? I mean, they've had some financial woes.
Yeah, that's any company. There are always, there's ups and downs in any industry, transportation, and especially motorcycling. It sees its ebbs and flows, as time goes on. But I'm excited to see Harley jump into a whole nother realm and see, try to attract people that you might not have attracted in the past. Someone like myself, like I never saw myself as a Harley guy, but some of the new things are coming out with. I'm like, man, I should give Harley a look at, at possibly getting one of their bikes. That looks more my style. That's super cool, and it has that Harley backing, that Harley heritage behind it too. So it's almost like a twofer right there. So
for sure,
for someone like me that's just really really into that newer, more modern style, it gives me another option to turn to. I think that's the same for a lot of people.
And this isn't Buell. This isn't another affiliate. This is under the Harley brand. We're expecting.
This is HD. Yeah. 100% Harley
awesome.
Davidson.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited.
I want to transition a little bit because AJ and I have talked about this a bunch, and we talk about it in reference to mountain biking specifically. Is that the mountain bike industry over the last 5-6 years has had such dramatic changes to frame design, suspension design, the geometry of everything, and they're all so radically different. You could have two mountain bikes under the same segment, like on enduro or cross country, and they will look completely different, have completely different suspension setups, completely different everything. Really, when you look at it, they don't look anything alike, other than the fact that they have two wheels and frame. And where I'm going with this, and what AJ and I have talked about, is I wonder why there's not that innovation in moto specifically. I mean, outside of incremental improvements, which we see every year, right? That's how these brands stay competitive every year.
Very incremental.
We haven't seen any radical design changes in years. I mean, the last I could think of that would be considered quote unquote radical is maybe either going to monoshock in the rear, whenever that was, the 80s, and maybe aluminum frames.
Like fuel injection, right?
Fuel injection, you're right. Okay, fuel injection, you're right. That's a great one. But as far as like a radical change, I mean, if you take an average person and you set them up in front of a range of different mountain bikes, they would say, those all look different. You throw them all in front of a stack of motocross or supercross bikes, and outside of the color, I mean, they're all designed exactly the same. Outside of the incremental differences, I wonder why that is. Do we have any hypotheses on that?
I think it has to do with the overall cost of manufacturing the bike. So, I know that in an industry like motorcycling, the cost of each individual part can be pretty pricey, especially when you start getting into more innovative technologies and just outside the box thinking. So I think if we saw more manufacturers doing throwing all the bells and whistles in terms of what technologies they have to come out with new exciting looking things, I think the bikes on our end would end up being 15, 20 grand for a dirt bike, which I know for myself, I'm having a hard time swallowing buying a new dirt bike this year for just under 10 grand. So, that could push a lot of people away. And, just us as motocross racers, I know we want to see innovation, but we're very adverse to change. So, like when Yamaha came out with their backwards engine, I mean, it still was a dirt bike, but people freaked out, man. They were like, well, I'm not used to changing my air filter where my gas tank can be, so I'm not getting that bike. And you know what I mean? Even though the technology was there saying like, hey, on your power stroke, your piston and crank are going to be like vertical, so it's the most efficient way to produce power. People were still like, no, I'm used to my engine being this way, and I want to keep it that way. So
and it didn't help that James Stewart got on that bike and was awful on it.
Yeah, so that they got some bad press there too. But or talking with AJ, I know AJ's not a big airport guy. That was a pretty big innovation too, where we brought some things in. So even though the technology may have not been there, but the minute people heard about it, they would automatically kind of wrote it off. Not saying that you're one of those, AJ, because you actually did do extensive testing on it. But I know a lot of people who just heard the word air fork and were completely turned off and switched brands. So I think a lot of that goes into it too, where we kind of stick with what we know and what we like, and these incremental changes are kind of the better way of going about giving us new innovation.
But I think you're right about that. Like as far as the cost goes, it certainly plays a factor in how often they can make these changes and how drastic the changes can be. So then as a community, as an industry, we just get used to the same stuff. So that's probably what's happening there. I mean, so I just picked up my new mountain bike last night, and if that bike retails for $5,200, my Santa Cruz Nomad that I had before that bike was I think that bike was $7,200. That's basically the cost of a dirt bike for something that doesn't even have a motor. And
dude, the top of the line Transition Patrol that I'm on is upwards of $10,000.
Yeah,
like
these
mountain bikes
is what it
stupid.
is. So yeah, and that's what it is. So I think Dave's exactly right. If there was that much R&D and extensive time put into making the dirt bikes better, they wouldn't be $9 grand, $10 grand, which is already a lot for most people. They would be double that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. The only reason why is because I disagree. For this reason, mountain bikes, mountain bikes are like craft beer right now. There's like a little mountain bike company popping up left and right. You can't even keep track of how many of these little brands that are popping up. Mm-hmm. They all have this innovation, that innovation. The motorcycle manufacturers are backed by global, humongous companies with a ton of resources at their fingertips. Not like evil bicycles in transition in the Pacific Northwest who have like 3 guys in plaid shirts that are engineers that work out of an office next to a pine tree. You know what I mean?
so you think that's why it's costing so much, is because these are just small companies that don't have the resources?
I think that part of it is they don't have like the economies of scale to really break it down for a consumer to be on a mountain bike that's super cheap. But on the same side of the coin, I would say that the big motorcycle brands, they have a ton of resources. So I don't know if it's an apples to apples comparison just based on R&D. I think there's got to be another factor. Also, carbon fiber isn't cheap, and there's not a whole lot of carbon fiber stock components on motorcycles, if any. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. And I know we've talked about this before. Is like there's so many radically different designs for bikes, including like the new what are they calling it? The idle pulley. Have you seen these? Where the chain like runs up over the top of like the suspension linkage and then back down to the rear cassette, and it's supposed to.
No.
Yeah, a lot of the downhill bikes are doing it, and the idea is that it allows the rear wheel to travel in instead of an up and down strictly linear, it allows it to travel in two axes. One is backward and up at the same time, which allows it to overcome obstacles more efficiently. And there's a whole bunch of technology behind it, but it's just a small example of like. There is innovation to be had, and I don't know if like why don't we see that in the motorcycle industry? And I will say also is we see a huge variety of street motorcycles, right? There's so many different types of street motorcycles you can get on. You could get on the old school choppers. You could get on the new school choppers like a V-Rod. You could get on supermotos. You could get
like a full dresser.
Street bike. you could, I mean, the array is huge. You go on the off-road world, and you have basically 4 or 5 colors. And if you want steel or aluminum,
like, right? And look at the different. If you saw, I know I sent a picture of my new mountain bike to you last night, and you must have zoomed in because you started looking at all the different things on it. I feel like I need a user manual for this bike. Like, it is so radically different from the Nomad that I had before. It's got levers all over the bars. It's got like these different suspension lockouts. I don't know how to work a thing on this bike.
The worst thing for you. It's the worst thing for you.
Right. I need it as simplified as possible. Like, there's too many things going on. There's 5 levers on the handlebars, not including my brake levers. So there's 7 levers.
That's the first thing I noticed. That's the driver post lever, lockout rear, lockout front. You have a front derailleur, which I didn't even know they made those anymore on mountain bikes.
Yeah, it's a 2x, right? Which is odd. I was kind of mad about that, honestly.
I'd smash it. I would smash it with a hand.
Yeah, I got to return it. Just another thing to worry about. I just want to pedal.
You guys are making me want to like. You guys are making me want to step up my mountain bike game right now. After seeing your bike, AJ, it's freaking awesome, man. I literally almost thought about buying one last night just to like keep up.
It's beautiful, but unfortunately,
it's a nice bike.
It's just gonna sit in my room and look pretty. Like 95% of my riding is done on Zwift inside anyway. So I guess now I have an excuse to go out. I got to get it.
There's a word for that. There's a word for that. It's called tool.
Oh. I'm a fair weather rider at its best.
Oh, 100%.
Tony Cat made me into that from day one. We never rode if it was. It could be sprinkling on the way to the track, and you would turn around and pack it up.
Dude, Dave, oh my God, AJ, we would always bust on AJ in the woods, anywhere. Like, I don't understand how he could ever. I don't know how he rode Seattle last year. I don't know how, because AJ's the guy who, like, if he encounters a puddle on the trail, he's unclipped off his bike, walking around it every single time.
No.
Yeah,
I've never seen AJ ride through a puddle ever.
No, I haven't.
It could be a beautiful summer day.
I walk around it. I won't ride my bike through it. And I do that group rides here in Reston too. And these are guys that I'm not super familiar with. And we're hauling ass, and we get to the creek, and I'm like, hold on, and I hop off. I got to run across and like tiptoe on the rock so I don't get wet, and then I flip back in, and they're all just looking at me like, what is this guy doing? Can't get it dirty. It's because every time I show up, I'll get this from, and that Nomad that I had 2.5 hard years on it, and every time I'd show up to ride, somebody would ask me, "Oh, a maiden voyage, huh?" I'm like, no, this bike's 2 years old.
Remember when we were at Killington last year and everybody said the same thing? Like, would you pick that up last night? I was like, no, I just take care of it.
Yeah. And speaking of the differences between mountain bike and the moto world, people just don't wash their mountain bikes. I've found that's just a common theme.
Yeah. That bugs me. That really bugs me.
I can't get
I'm
on a
not
bike
paying
unless it's
$5,000
clean.
for a bike.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like it's not happy and it doesn't want to work right.
I mean, AJ, you saw my KTM. That thing was like coming off the showroom floor every time. Like,
Yeah, but your mountain bike's always like brand new when you take them out too. I always feel like whether it's dirt bike or road bike or mountain bike, if I go out with a dirty bike, it just, I don't know. I feel like it's not happy with me and it doesn't want
feel
to
like a
work
scrub.
right.
Yeah.
Got to look good,
Agreed.
feel good, ride good.
Ride good. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, Mr. Dave, talk to us about the collective experience, because not only are you like an awesome engineer and have a super cool day job, but you have a fiery entrepreneurial spirit, and you've created something to further immerse yourself in this world. So AJ hit on it. Now's your time to tell everybody what the collective experience is, how you brought this idea to life, where you envision it going, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So basically, it's everything that AJ said. You know, it's a very immersive, exclusive VIP program for fans to get behind the scenes. So, you know, fans like myself who've always wanted to see what it's like to work with a pro rider or get behind sort of that velvet curtain and you know, not just sit in the stands watching my heroes, actually be a part of their team or you know get a chance to touch their bike and see exactly what it's like to hang around them. This is the program for them. It gets them as close up to the action as possible. So, like AJ said, you know, you're helping get his program all set up. You're helping him with scheduling and video review. You're meeting a lot of people in the industry who are some of the shot callers or key holders, you know, for a lot of opportunities. So, I mean, you're meeting AJ's gear reps. You're meeting his suspension techs. You're meeting his mechanic. And for people who want to get their start in Supercross one day as a racer or somebody working, it's a great place to make these relationships and to get that firsthand experience with different riders. So, you know, we started this thing a couple years ago. It's really kind of snowballed into something bigger than what I thought it was going to be. And the riders have been great with it. And one cool thing about the program is that it's unique for each person that does it. So AJ can tailor it to best suit him and his fans. Tyler Intignap can do it the way he wants to. Tyler Bowers can do it the way that he wants to. And we also help fund privateers like AJ. So each person that signs up, you know, that money is going to help support AJ. So it's not just the collective that's pocketing this change and going about our business. You know, I'm giving AJ, you know, envelopes of cash or PayPaling him, you know, after each transaction to help further his career. And not many fans can say, hey, you know, I actually personally got a chance to know and meet AJ and call him a friend and help fund him for this season. So it's a really unique opportunity. We've got two different tiers with riders like Tyler and Adam Insignap and AJ Catanzaro, one of the best Supercross riders in the world. And
yep, the best.
Yeah, the best.
Thank you.
We got, and you get to also work with riders who you might not have heard of, like Dave Pulley or Bubba Pauly or Devin Sorensen. You know, people that still are, you know, great to work with, very personable, but might not have as much fame or as much popularity as AJ Cat. So we try to help as many privateers as we can. We're trying to unroll an elite program where riders get to work with, or fans get to work with some pretty big name riders. It's still in the works right now. We're working through it, but it's just a program to really help people get closer to the action. That's 100%. It's for the fans. It's to grow the sports, to help the riders out, and to give them another level of immersion, another platform to fall in love with the sport.
And for the riders that help, I mean, that's for, you know, let's say it's $250 that we're pocketing from that. That's an entry fee, you know, so if getting that every weekend as a rider, extra 200, extra $300 is definitely a big deal. And for somebody like myself, I've been very lucky as a privateer. Not necessarily lucky. I definitely pride myself on being an entrepreneur of the sport and doing a good job of marketing myself. I've been very lucky to be able to fund it each year. I know there's a lot of privateers that are not nearly in the same boat that I am in and are, let's just use Josh Greco as an example. I mean, somebody like Josh Greco is relying on every single penny he makes one weekend to go show up and race the next weekend. And he's not alone. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are like that. Right. So maybe for like a Devin Sorensen, for a Dave Poley, for a Bubba Pauly, these guys need that $250 so that they can go and race the next weekend, try to earn a little bit more so that they can keep the ball rolling.
Exactly, and it pays at double, because they're making that extra bit of cash, but they're also making like lifelong fans, other supporters. For privateers, man, to have somebody rooting for them or in their corner, it's huge. They don't have the big long lines like a Ken Roxon or a Chad Reed. So one fan that's like, man, this is awesome. I'm a lifelong Devin Sorensen fan. I'm a lifelong AJ Cat fan. It means the world to these guys. Like they really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's all beneficial. I mean, the only reason I'm not in the same boat as those guys is I think I've done a good job with the academy and growing that, and I earn an income from training all these riders, so I'm able to stay afloat. But if for these riders, for myself, like all of these fans matter. Having somebody in your corner on race day, having an extra person. I think what a lot of people don't realize is on race day, as a rider, whether you're a factory guy or a privateer guy, you want to worry about riding your dirt bike and that's it. And for us, we don't have the liberty of doing that. We could show up to a race and many times I'm worrying about where to find oil to change the oil or where to find a gas station so we could find pump fuel for the bike. Things that don't sound like that big of a deal, but on race day, like you're dealing with so many different things, trying to find food after time qualifying gets over and it's 4:00 and you're getting ready for the night show and you realize all you have is Cliff Bars and some applesauce packets and somebody, needs to go scramble and find food. It's nice to have an extra person that worries about that for you and can go get the food before you have to worry about it. It's just like, I know for me personally, if I can just show up and worry about riding my dirt bike and that's it, that's a life changer.
And AJ, I think you touched on something that is an awesome part of this program, and not just the foot in the door of the industry and helping the riders, but really getting an appreciation for the behind the scenes. If anybody's even interested in the day to day of what goes on at a Supercross race, because I think the average person who's a fan of the sport and watches on TV and is a fan of yours, I'll tell you, it's glamorized. From
it's
the
not
moment
the glitz
you get
and glamour
up,
that they think.
Oh, I mean, like you hit it right on the head about worrying about meals, worrying about getting gas. I mean, at Daytona, we threw the gas tank in Dave's rental car, and we were scrambling to get gas the morning
Right.
of. And
Right.
but even like right down to that, like people, I guess I would have just assumed that you ran race gas. Why wouldn't you? You're on a pro Supercross track. Nope. Pull up to 7-Eleven and grab 93 and throw it in the rental car and get into the pits. But like that type of knowledge that you really would never get, that's something that the collective experience offers is,
Yeah.
hey, you want to know the nitty gritty? Yeah.
Like you're a perfect example of somebody who went into that. So we've been friends for a while, but that with Daytona this last year was your first time like really being full on involved.
Right.
And I think you were probably like,
I was like, oh my God, what is this kid doing?
Saturday, you're probably like, what are you kidding me? What is this guy doing? But that, and what's crazy is that I'm one of the upper tier of the privateer guys that has, more, I would say, resources than a lot of the privateer guys do, which is hard to believe because when we're scrambling for fuel the day of, it is very glamorized, and granted, when you watch it on TV, of course, it's supposed to be that way. I mean, these are the best riders in the world, but at the same time, there's that select few that are showing up and can just get geared up in their semi and hop on their bike and go. There's a lot of people that are doing exactly what I'm doing week in, week out.
Yeah. So, I mean, for anybody who's interested, it's a great program. I was fortunate enough to be with you at Daytona, and be with you at Foxborough. And I saw the interns and what they were contributing and the experience that they got. So, I can attest firsthand that it's a really, really cool opportunity. Dave,
yeah,
there's going to be some people out there listening who've had a spark of an idea before, and myself included. How do you take that leap from idea? Oh, hey, that would be cool if I did this, or oh, that would be a good opportunity to earn an extra buck, or oh, I have a business idea. Where do you get that spark to take the next step? What advice would you give?
Oh man, I would say honestly, just to start. That was one of my big issues with when I first thought of this idea when it must have been like 2015, 2016. I don't remember what we were doing, but I was on track walk with AJ, and I think we were helping film something for him. And just walking around, I'm like, man, this is like pretty cool. My first track walk and hang out with my buddy all day. It's fun. I'm like, man, I would have paid him like $500 for this thing. This is pretty cool. And like an idea sparked, and then immediately that voice in the back of your head was, oh no, this is way too over your head. You have no idea what you're doing. Too many logistics. You don't have the money for it. Blah blah blah. So you'd immediately get shot down by your own self. And then if you can get past that stage to start, going through it, you think of, oh well, I've never done this before. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to look so janky. I would honestly, my biggest thing would be just to start. Write a plan down. Write down what some of your goals are, what you're looking to get out of this, and where you want to see this thing get built to, and just start. It takes a huge time commitment. It looks a lot more glamorous than it is, especially the first season. I mean, it was slim pickings for a while, man. I was sleeping in the car for a bit, and I remember AJ actually had a couple hotel rooms with an extra bed, and I would just collapse on the floor and sleep there for 2 hours, and then hop in my car and drive off. And actually a couple times when I didn't even get any sleep, I would wake up at 2 a.m, drive to a race, go all the way until 2 a.m. the next day, and then say, "Oh, see you guys later," and hop in a car and drive for 5 hours. So there's definitely a point where it's going to be really tough for a bit, but I would honestly just start, reach out to as many mentors as you can, and just keep that hope going.
I think that's good advice, to just do it. I mean, Bryce, look at us with this podcast. Like, how long were we talking about wanting to start a podcast, and then it finally took for one of us or whatever to let's just do it. Let's just start it now.
Yeah.
Like, there's no better time to start it than right now. For so long, I'm like, well, there's a million podcasts out there. Same thing with my YouTube channel. Well, there's a million different YouTube channels out there. Why would I bother now? Maybe if I started 5 years ago, it would have made sense. No, just do it. And I'm just do it. Glad
you'll always find an excuse. If you look for an excuse, you will find one. So just don't even look for them. I would agree. I mean, even this podcast is a perfect example. We've talked about it for years, literally years.
Yep.
And it was just time. So
it's going to take hard work. It's going to most likely take a while to get going. Just like anything, it's going to take the hard work to get it going. But the chances, look at it this way. This is the way I look at almost everything in life. Just say yes and just do it, because you're not going to have the regret that you did it or that you put your effort into trying it. Even if you failed, you're not going to regret that. What you're going to regret is never having done it. Just like with traveling.
Exactly.
And I use Jeremiah, my mechanic, as an example for this. With the traveling, I used to always talk to him and say, you're not going to regret going to Australia. You're not going to regret it.
Yeah.
What you're going to regret is having stayed home and worked for those 2 weeks. And so what if you made a couple $1,000 more? You missed out on an opportunity that you would have never experienced. Like the trip we just went to Ecuador. I mean, I went into that with no idea what was going to happen. No idea who was going to be there, what the class was going to be like. I just said yes. Because I'm like, well, you know what? In a week and a half, I'm going to have an experience and I'm not going to regret it. Unless I got killed. Maybe I'll regret that. But other than that, you're going to you're going to be glad that you did it. I think that's good advice.
Well, 100%. I totally agree with that.
So, Dave, where do you envision this going? Where are you wanting to take it?
I want to make this as big as possible. I'd like to be like the number one stop for behind the scenes or fan experiences in Supercross and motocross. I mean, I want to have every rider that anyone could ever want in the program. I want all of the big name guys underneath the collective experience. I still want to make sure that our focus is to grow the sport and help privateer riders. I'd like to have experiences where you could, shadow a broadcaster, shadow one of the head refs of the sport, or even grow outside of motocross and supercross, go more into like a NASCAR or like the NBA. I'd love to see this grow into a phenomenon outside of motocross and supercross, because the concept, I think, my unbiased opinion, is great. This could be used for charities, even, where if you're a athlete who really doesn't need the extra couple grand from a group of people shadowing you, you could use that to fund a charity or to do some sort of philanthropic ventures with. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I want to make sure that I put as much effort into this program as I possibly can. Because like AJ said, I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to say, oh man, I wish I went after that one rider, or I wish I did this one thing. I just want to make sure that I take advantage of every opportunity that I can to make sure I'm helping riders like AJ and all the fans out there as much as possible.
Yeah, I think you hit it with saying that this can go well outside of supercross and motocross, and obviously that's your passion. But I mean, it's such a there's so many realms where fans could basically live their dream experience. I mean, I totally recognize that, and I think we shouldn't underestimate people's just desire to be connected with celebrity in general. And shameless plug, I haven't talked to him in a while. I last saw him over, I think, last Christmas break. But a friend of mine from high school, he is co-founder of an app called Cameo. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but have you heard of it, AJ?
I feel like I have, but maybe not.
So essentially, he has it's an app where, and sorry if I don't do this any justice, but as far as I know, it's an app where you can go on and basically pay for celebrity shout outs on social media. And they've developed a roster of celebrities. And you could go on Cameo site and check out who they actually have. But
book personalized video shootouts from your favorite people. Browse our talent.
Dude, it's genius. And it's very, there's a lot of parallels to this where, where there you're paying for a shout out. So it's a very little interaction with a celebrity, but I mean, the collective experience, you're paying for an immersive experience, hands on with that person. So I can only imagine if you could get that momentum and gain bigger and bigger talent. AJ, believe it or not, there's a lot more famous people than you out there. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I agree to disagree.
but no, I mean,
Snooki's on here. You can get a shot.
Oh, did they get Snooki?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll have to have Devin.
Deal, man.
Ooh,
I'll have to have Devin Townsend give me a shout out. Yeah, man.
That's funny, but it's a great idea. And
it's a great idea.
It really is along the same lines as what Dave's doing, but what Dave's doing is obviously much more hands-on.
Yep.
But there's a market for it in just about any industry.
And that's my point. There's a market for connecting real people with athletes, celebrities, whatever type of experience they're looking for. I mean, there's definitely a market for it, which, I mean, it's really cool.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, I want to make sure that happens.
Now, Bryce, how are we wanting to work this? I definitely want to dive
we should
deep
keep Dave on.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into questions. I think Dave might be able to lend a hand in some of these responses, and if not, then he could just listen and enjoy our company.
Yeah, you're stuck with this, Dave. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, damn it. I do actually. I want to shout out to AJ because he's been a huge supporter of the program, and he's helped me kind of really debug this thing from early concept. So shout out to AJ, and I hope a lot of the listeners really follow along with this guy and all of his ventures and stuff. And one cool thing that we actually rolled out last year that's coming back is the internship program, where it's $30 for the application, and people get a chance to actually work for as part of the collective team and part of AJ Catanzaro team to be an intern for a race. And that's probably more geared towards people who want to work in the industry, who aren't just AJ fans, but are just fans of the sport and want to get a career in Supercross or motocross. And we've had people who went on to work for Feld and the film crew, work for gear brands, and work for riders as mechanics. So if anyone's interested, check
awesome.
it out. It's all over AJ's Instagram. It's at thecollectivexp.com. We're starting to get a bunch of applications in, and we want to make sure we get a chance, give everyone a chance to be selected for all these different rounds. So yeah, shouts out to AJ again.
Yes, sir. Glad to be a part of it, man. And we're holding you hostage for these questions, so
okay,
you're not going anywhere.
Hey, I genuinely think that there's room for Dave to have his input counted. So we'll keep him on. So listeners, this is the part of the show where we delve into some of the questions we've gotten from supporters like you. Again, questions.catpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions for AJ specifically, about his program, about his underwear, whatever you want, send those questions over. If you have some general questions about training, advice, what type of Airbnb you should get in Ecuador, anything like that, shoot some questions over to us.
The more personal and intrusive they are, the better.
Oh, 100%. So I'm going to get into this question. This question comes from Christoph in Germany, and it fits the theme of our podcast perfectly. So we're going to address some of his question here. And it was a long email, and we thank Christoph for the time and the compliments.
It was an awesome email.
It was a very nice email. It made our day reading it. So thank you to Christoph. But the nitty gritty is that he's relatively new to motocross. And it sounds like he's been doing it for a couple years now and starting to take himself more seriously in the sport and wants to, he's 30 years old, generally fit, and wants to sustain this sport into the future. And his questions was basically, what type of exercise should he be doing that's really moto specific or thereabouts? And outside of we all know cardiovascular fitness is paramount. But what specifically can he be doing as far as getting dialed to be well balanced, to manipulate the bike, et cetera, et cetera? So I think it's a great question. It fits our fitness theme, training theme, and the motocross theme. And I think there'll be some discussion that will be all encompassing for really anybody looking to up their gym game. So AJ, you wanna lead us off with that?
Yeah. Let me start by saying everybody is different. What works for me may not work for you, may not work for Dave, may not work for Christoph. You have to find what's right for you. Definitely as far as diet and exercise goes, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes trainers will make is they try to have one program that they utilize for everyone. And it's just not going to work. I mean, I'm 25 years old, and I really think that I'm not yet at my peak fitness, but I'm getting there. And I've definitely tailored my program to where I think I've started to figure things out. I went through phases of not heavy lifting, but definitely primarily being in the gym. I went through phases of refusing to do a push-up and a pull-up and only being on a road bike. And now I think I find myself sort of in a happy medium. So I'll give you guys a little insight into what I do, and I think it's good for anyone that wants to be a well-rounded athlete. The way I look at it is you always want to be balanced on the dirt bike. The whole purpose of anything I teach in my technique is to be balanced. And I think that goes the same for being a balanced human being, having good posture. Everything I do in the gym is to kind of not center me out, but I guess realign me. That is the reason I do yoga. So I do yoga, I stretch, I foam roll. I want to be, I don't want to have anything overdeveloped or underdeveloped. I think the problem with me before was, and this is me personally, I was very built upper body. It just genetically, if I go to the gym and I start working
very built. Very built.
Okay, let me rephrase.
You were built.
Incredibly built.
Cut.
World's best
Very
supercross rider and bodybuilder.
Extremely shredded. Pretty much, if you went
Very
to the beach,
built.
I'm turning heads. I'm breaking necks.
Hey guys, this is me just checking AJ's ego because he needs it every once in a while.
Yeah.
So he was very built, but he was still 20 pounds less of muscle than his younger brother.
Yeah, which thank God. But genetically, like when we get it from good old Tony Cat, like we got the man pecs, like, which is good aesthetically, I guess, sure. But I found that, and I had very overdeveloped forearms, which is terrible for motocross. So the stronger,
but good for something else. We don't go there.
Yeah. True. Very true. I found that no matter how good my technique was, my upper body was, and especially in a panic situation, was grabbing onto the bike and using more of my upper body than I should have been. So therefore, arm pump was just detrimental. I'm talking 2013, 2014, 2015. My arm pump was so bad that it was dangerous for me to even be riding. Then I went to, okay, let's just road bike and not ever do even so much as do a push-up, which I think was good on the dirt bike, but everywhere else in life, I was having some serious problems. I had chronic lower back pain. My posture, I found, was not good. I had really underdeveloped muscles. I had really tight muscles, which was pulling me into a weird posture. It just wasn't healthy. It was terrible, to the point where I thought I was going to need surgery on my back, and then I started to realize, like, wait a second, if I just start strengthening certain muscle groups and start stretching others, maybe that'll fix the problem. And sure enough, my back pain is nearly completely gone. So making a long story long here, lots of yoga. So yoga for two reasons. One, you want to stretch, obviously, especially as you get older. Two, what yoga does is it teaches you to breathe in stressful situations, which for motocross is huge. Anytime you panic, anytime the bike gets a little sideways, what do? You hold your breath. What yoga does is it puts you in very uncomfortable positions, but it teaches you to focus and hone in on your breath and just be consistent with your breathing. So I think that's huge. And I admit I don't do it as frequently as I should. There was a time where I was doing yoga 5, 6, 7 times a week. Now it's not nearly that often, but I do try to do it, and I stretch every single day. When I'm in the gym, I don't lift heavy. Everything I do is 12 to 17 reps, fairly lightweight. And whenever I am actually lifting a weight, I isolate a limb. Reason for that is I find that it helps with kind of just the balance and the coordination of things, but it's also just building your core. So instead of actually doing a core specific workout per se, basically my whole workout is core. So if I'm doing a overhead dumbbell press, standing up, I'm doing it with one hand. I'm staying as centered as possible. You're engaging your core so that you're not leaning to one side or anything like that. If I'm doing a dumbbell chest press laying on my back, same thing, single arm. I do single arm, just cable rows, and even when I'm doing leg stuff, I'm doing lunges, I'm doing single leg press. single leg calf extension, or I don't know the names to all these things, but I found that works really well for me because it also helps me not lift that heavy. And it definitely, it kind of incorporates the coordination aspect of it, right? Anything you want to add to any of that, or what are your thoughts on that? I find that works really, really well for me. And
Right. I think.
Let me reiterate. I'm only in the gym twice a week. That's it.
Okay, that was the perfect clarification there. I think certainly you have to start with what your goal is. So there was a time where I was in the gym at least 5 days, if not 7 days a week. But you have to really find what your goal is, what your end result what you want it to be. Because I was in the gym and I was training specifically for aesthetics. That was all I cared about. Some I wanted just to get stronger, but as basically relative to gaining an aesthetic. Having said that, I can attest to exactly what AJ said, because during my hardest training months or weeks or times when I would be putting on muscle, and I was never big, but I at one point I was pretty muscle dense. And when I was lifting the heaviest I was, what I felt the absolute worst on the bike, because you bind up. Your arm pump goes from 0 to 100 so quickly. And I think there's definitely needs, especially with if you're trying, and speaking directly to Christoph, if you're trying to improve yourself on a motorcycle, you need to take two big things into the equation. One is there's no denying that you need cardiovascular fitness, because when you're cardiovascular fit, your body can clear carbon dioxide faster. You could use more oxygen more efficiently. You're not burning through all your carbohydrates and nutrients that you need to sustain exercise as quickly. You can sustain longer, right? But you also need to not neglect the muscle groups and the things that are specific to being on a motocross bike. So as AJ touched on, core, I think, would be absolutely critical. And, things, specific exercises that I think would be super beneficial is maybe not necessarily squats and deadlifts and all like the power moves, but more stuff that is basically getting you more with the fast twitch muscles. So, for example, box jumps, right? I think that would be super beneficial. That explosive power right off the bat, going from flat-footed, kind of a squat position, jumping onto a platform or a box, whatever you want to call it. I think that would be extremely helpful for motocross, because you're constantly doing squats on the bike. So to be able to do that and to be able to react quickly and get the fast twitch muscles engaged, I think that would be super helpful. Also, like lateral side to side jumps where you can, and you're talking about keeping the bike between your legs in whoops, in obstacles, over jumps. You want your core and lower body strong. You don't need it to be bulky, but you need it to be strong. So side to side, lateral jumps, you could do side lunges, stuff like that. That I think would be extremely helpful on the bike.
And let me say this too, because somebody asked that same question when we were in Ecuador, and my mechanic Jeremiah answered it this way, which I totally agree with, and he's going to roll his eyes when he hears me answer this question this way, because I'm guilty of this as well. What comes first is seat time. Plain and simple, you need to ride your dirt bike. Riding your dirt bike is going to work muscles that you can't work when you're off of them. You're going to get more comfortable, so you'll be more comfortable breathing and relaxing when you're on the bike. Nothing compares to riding the dirt bike. And I'm a perfect example of that. I love working out. I love riding my bicycle. I love being in the gym. It's a passion of mine. I'm almost always in peak fitness, or at least, very close to it. And as Bryce said, I'm shredded. So.
Oh my God.
No, seriously. But when I get on the dirt bike, I can't make it more than a lap or two, no matter what. Because there's times where I go months without riding. And no matter how good of shape you think you're in off the bike, no matter how good of shape you're in, even on the bicycle, and I would say the bicycle is probably the best thing you could ever do off of the dirt bike. I could be in the best shape of my life on the bicycle, but if I'm not getting the seat time, I could hop on a dirt bike after a 2-month, even a month hiatus off of the dirt bike, and I'm gonna be winded after a couple laps. It's just how it is, and I think at our level, at a professional level, it becomes more critical to find that edge and to try to separate yourself a little bit more by being in crazy shape off of the bike. But I think at any amateur level or even, expert level locally, it comes down to who's just going to ride the most. The guy that rides 4 days a week is almost always going to beat the guy that rides once a week.
There's definitely going to be no substitute for seat time, for sure. There's no one that'll disagree with that. But just playing devil's advocate, there's for exercises in the off season for people who can't be on a track every day, 2, 3, 4 days a week. The general advice I think that I would give, and I'm not a trainer, but I have enough time into this type of training where I can pretty confidently give the average person some advice is, you want to be balanced for sure, as AJ was talking about. So you don't go into the gym and do push-ups only and biceps only. You want to make sure that for every muscle group you train exactly the opposite of that muscle group. So if you're doing push-ups, make sure you're doing pull-ups or rear delt flies or rows, something to counter the other motion that you're doing. And also take into consideration what AJ said about reps. So don't train for bulking up. Don't train high weight, low reps. And there's a lot of research. We could point into a million different directions on podcasts for fitness that will talk about different philosophies on building muscle and et cetera, et cetera. But I think that the most commonly accepted training advice for this world would be don't train to bulk up. Don't train for heavy weight because two things. One, you're going to raise the potential for injury if you're training too heavy. Right? You don't want to do weight that you're not capable of doing. Generally, you should be going into the gym and not needing a spotter. As soon as you start saying that you need a spotter, you're probably sacrificing form and you're probably sacrificing
way too much weight.
The quality. Yeah, exactly. So push yourself, but keep your reps high. And what that's going to do, it's also going to help your output during a strenuous cardiovascular activity like motocross. So if you're training for strength, if you're going heavy, if you're trying to constantly up the weight, you're doing that at the detriment of being able to sustain that motion for a prolonged period of time. So
right. You want to have muscle
a lot
endurance,
of it is
right?
Endurance, and some of it is genetic. Some of it you're going to see people with more fast twitch muscle fiber, people with more slow twitch, and there's some research that would suggest you could change those based on training. But just for the quick overview of this, fast twitch is explosive muscle movements that require a high amount of carbohydrate or glycogen to do a reaction. And the slow twitch is more sustained over an exercise. You deplete your micronutrients a lot slower, and you want to basically cater to that in a sport like motocross. So high repetitions, do the things that kind of make sense. So you're don't overtrain forearms or you're going to end up with arm pump. But you can develop those muscles with a higher rep, forearm extensions or curls. And AJ we might differ on this philosophy a little bit because you've had such bad arm pump in the past, but I would think that there's, for the average person who's trying to just go from maybe a 1 to a 5, that you should be strengthening your forearms to grip the bike better. You should be doing stuff in the lower body to grip the bike better.
See, now I would say the opposite as far as forearms go, but this is where everyone could differ. For me, what I've found is the weaker my forearms are, the better off I am. And so I had arm pump surgery this time last year, so about a year ago. What that is they go in orthoscopically and they cut open your muscle fascia. So what arm pump is, as far as I know, is it's basically like compartment syndrome. So your muscle and the scar tissue, everything is bound so tight in there. And it's, I guess, so overdeveloped that your blood can't get out. So you would, theoretically, the more muscle you build on top of that, well, at least for somebody like myself, the worse that issue is going to be. So when they go in arm pump surgery, they cut open that muscle fascia. It physically pops open. It gives your arm kind of just room to breathe. So your blood can get in and it can get out. For me, after my arm pump surgery, and I should do it more often than I do it when I ride. I use the Forearm Strong. All the Forearm Strong device is it's simply a device to stretch your muscle. That's all it is. You can do it with your hand. The device itself just makes it a little bit easier to do, as being just one person rather than somebody else performing it on you. I'd say in a perfect world, I should probably use that device every day because it's going to stretch and it's going to elongate the muscle. For me, the more I can elongate that muscle, the more I can stretch it, the weaker it's going to be, the better off I am. But that's me. So I don't know. I don't know if there's enough research to say that's the right move for everyone. I think sitting there and doing forearm specific workouts all the time probably is, I would say, a bad move for anybody.
Yeah, I would not recommend that either.
But forearms, it depends on your body build. And that just goes back to my point of everybody's different. So, I mean, Bryce, you might disagree slightly or just have a different, opinion on. I think being a well-balanced athlete is what's important. And if that requires doing a little bit of forearm workouts or, bicep workouts, then that's fine. But I don't think for anybody that's riding a dirt bike, I don't think we should be isolating muscle groups and going to the gym for bicep and chest day, or bicep and back day, or chest and shoulder day. No. You're going to the gym and you're working out everything at once, the days that you're at the gym.
I agree. I was only making the reference to whatever you're doing, make sure it's balanced. That's my point. I don't think that you should do a body specific day. I think honestly the best thing that you can do, and I started doing this in the spring, was I would do basically everything that I was trying to do in a week, where I would have chest. I was one of those types. I had a chest day. I had my back day. I did all that. So I know
I did too.
Really not that effective. And I just started literally whatever I was doing for the week, I would try to do it in a day. I would get an hour and a half workout in, run through the whole program. My heart rate stays up, so I'm getting a little bit of a cardio. And I'm you and I, we both wear heart rate monitors. I know where my heart rate zones are, so I know where, and I would recommend that to anybody who's trying to up their fitness game, especially with motocross, is you kind of want to know where you are so you can get yourself in that zone off the bike. And so in the gym, if you're doing a whole body circuit, you're keeping your heart rate in like a zone 3, zone 4 consistently. That's paramount.
Right. Shoot, I was going to add something to that. Yeah, you're not the gym. You're not the guy that's at the gym walking around and putting on the gloves to do his workouts, and the guy that's got a spotter. We're the guys that are at the gym, basically running from one piece of equipment to the next.
We're super annoying because
yeah, because
well, nobody. Are you on this?
I go to the gym. I go to the gym and I take up 12 different pieces of equipment and I incorporate them all into one workout.
Yeah, dude, are you on this? Yeah, I'll be on it in 30 seconds when I'm done on this machine. The other guy's yelling. Yeah, no, we get it.
Yeah.
We get it.
Can you guys touch
Yeah.
on that recovery portion of the question? Because I know for me, I'm far from a professional athlete, but being more of your average rider, like I like to go to the chiropractor and foam roll, like AJ said, and do some stretching. But is there anything else you guys do for the recovery portion to make sure a rider like him can keep progressing through the amateurs and hone their skills for even longer?
I think a big one would be, and I utilize this a lot, is a recovery spin. So, and I know I'm competitive. I get on the bicycle and I want to just pin it a lot of the time. But really the best thing you can do to flush out that lactic acid and just kind of, help your muscles recover to get the blood flowing is hop on the bicycle, hop on the stationary bike and do 45 minutes, do an hour, zone 1, zone 2. I'm talking so easy to the point where you feel like you're not even really getting a workout. 100 to 120 beats per minute, super, super easy. And flush all that crap out. That's my advice. Bryce, what would you say?
I would say exactly the same thing. I mean, don't underestimate the recovery day. And I was just reading an article the other day that, look, recovery day, take that time to recover. I mean, if you're putting yourself, especially if you're not conditioned, it's one thing if you're already conditioned and you're in race shape and you can sustain it. But if you're just starting out, or even if you're going from like a 2 to a 5 or 2 to a 6, 3 to a 7, whatever it is in the middle there, I mean, don't underestimate the recovery. Take the time and get sleep. And we talked about that was a couple podcasts ago, last podcast. Make sure you get your sleep. And maybe we should start putting some links up to the resources we're using for this knowledge that we're accumulating with training and stuff like that, because we could point you in the direction of a great sleep episode of a podcast that emphasizes how much athletic performance increases with just like an incremental increase in sleep time. So if you go from like a 6-hour a night sleep to an 8-hour night sleep, you get like a 20% gain in athletic performance. Something crazy like that.
I want to say it was Dr. Christopher Ryan, I think, on the Joe Rogan podcast, right?
It was. Correct.
It's a life-changing podcast. I've always been a big advocate on sleep, but this like really pounded into my head. Get the 7 hours.
At least.
At least, right? And it basically is what it said is anything less than 7 hours is basically it's just invalid. Like it's not enough. And the crazy thing is not many people are getting that. And it goes on to talk about if you stay up for 20 hours straight or something like that, or maybe even less amount of time than that, you're more impaired than you would be if you were legally drunk. It's an amazing podcast, and it definitely gives you some good insight to how important sleep is.
For sure. And I also think,
athlete.
Don't underestimate getting proper nutrients, especially after training. So I think you have up until an hour after training, and it varies for individuals, but within an hour, make sure you're replenishing nutrients. Protein, obviously the big one, but even carbohydrates. And during strenuous exercise, for every 4 calories burned, you're using 1 gram of carbohydrate. So if you're doing an exercise for a prolonged time, and which is a scenario that AJ and I are often in, where we're burning 800 to 1,000 calories in a cycling session or a moto or whatever, you have to replenish that carbohydrate just to get back to where you were. Not even counting on anything you're going to do in the future. Just to replenish the carbohydrate, you need 200 grams of carbohydrates. Not a lot of people do that because carbs are bad. But really, you need carbohydrate. Unless you're ketogenic, and we're not even going to start that conversation. But when you're doing an exercise that's physically demanding, as motocross or cycling or whatever, you need carbohydrates. So don't steer away from carbs.
The misconception there can be a lot of people, and I know myself included, would think carbs as pre-workout. Oh, like carb load, which is that's something that I definitely 100% don't do. But You need you absolutely, you need the carbs before and you need them after. As an athlete that has the type of workload that you and myself do, you need it.
Yep. And bioavailable carbohydrate, not pasta, stay away from. Bread, stuff like this, simple stuff like that, just stay away from it. It's really not going to help you. People used to do the carb load pasta dinner before a marathon. No. Everything is trending away from that, far away from that now. So it's readily bioavailable carbohydrate, fruit primarily. That's and I'll be honest, I'm much better coach than a player right now because I, as AJ knows, have a freaking crazy sugar addiction. So as fit and as in shape as I am, like, dude, I'll get my carbohydrates sometimes. I'll get my sugars from gummy bears and Skittles and all that stuff. You're the same way, I know.
I try not to be,
so,
but yeah.
Yeah. So, but no, fruits. I've recently really kind of reevaluated my whole diet, really, with particular regard to carbohydrate, and I've upped my fruit intake like crazy, and I've noticed a huge increase in performance from it.
Well, thank you, Christoph, for the question. We could go on all day on that topic, just like we could many other topics. My phone is currently at 1%, and I'd say we're about 85 minutes into this, so I think this is a good time to wrap it up.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And all of your experiences and insights and support of AJ. You've got a lot going on, and we appreciate your time so very much.
Oh, no problem, man. Yeah, anytime you guys need me on, I'll hop on. This is one of the more in-depth pods that I'm listening to currently. So, yeah, I'm just happy to be a guest and let me talk to you guys for a little bit.
Awesome, man. We look forward to having you back. So everybody check them out at thecollectivexp.com, on Instagram at thecollectivex. AJ, I'll sign us off. You plug your phone in. I don't want to lose this footage. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Our next couple episodes, we hope to keep the momentum up. We have some plans for some more great guests.
Right.
Yeah. Again,
subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to try to get them
subscribe.
Consistent, and submit your questions to questions.catpodcast@gmail.com. Send them in. There's no stupid question. And it gives us something cool to talk about. We can get you some insight, motor related or not.
Also,
right?
Also give us some suggestions. If you have an idea for a guest, or you have maybe you have a connection to somebody that you think would be cool to have on the podcast, let us know that. And we'll be happy to set something like that up. And we're looking for community feedback here. We want to make this podcast useful for you as listeners, as well as entertaining, and hopefully give you something that you can use a day-to-day, whether it be in life or in training or motocross, what have you. So stay tuned. I think if all goes well, our next episode, we should have a pretty cool guest that has nothing to do with motocross, but will be a very informative and fun episode. So thank you everybody for listening. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Google Play or on our Podbean site. That's all available online. And we look forward to hearing from you guys, and we appreciate your continued support.
All right, guys. Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you very much, Dave.
Oh, no worries, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, dude. It's a lot of fun. You guys are doing good.
All right, I'm signing off. I'm at 1%. I got to get out of here.
All right. Adios, amigos.
All right. Toodaloo.